Hello, music students. It's Mr. Roderick again. Once more, here in the music bunker high atop Mount Clemens. And I was just thinking today, I wonder if you've ever heard this song. Oh, you have heard that song. Well, how about this song? Oh, you have heard that. Well, how about this one? Well, maybe you haven't heard that one, but ask your grandparents about that and ask them about Billy Joel. How about this song? Have you ever heard this one? How about this one? Well, do you know who wrote all those pieces? You are correct. It's Ludwig van Beethoven. Today we're going to learn about Ludwig Beethoven and his life and his music, and especially his love of nature. So hang on. Let's travel back in time again to 1770. A place called Bonn, Germany. Beethoven was born a long time ago on December 16th or thereabouts in 1770. He was born in Bonn, Germany. His father was a court singer, not a really well-respected musician. Beethoven's grandfather, though, was Bonn's most famous musician. Beethoven's childhood had some wonderful times, some happiness, and some awful times. He loved taking long walks with his father along the Rhine River. But his father wanted Beethoven to be a great musician. At that time, Germany's most famous musician was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Everyone in Germany knew about Mozart and knew that Mozart was a child prodigy. That means that Mozart was a really good musician from the time he was a little kid. Mozart got to travel all over Europe with his sister and dad and play all the rich people's houses. Historians think that Beethoven's dad wanted to make Beethoven do that too, and be able to do that with him. So he started Beethoven on piano lessons at a very young age. But Beethoven's dad was not as good a teacher as Mozart's dad was. When Beethoven was a little boy, he would have to stand on a stool to reach the keys of the clavier. A clavier is the kind of keyboard that they had back in Beethoven's time. Not very many people had a piano. So Beethoven would have to stand on a stool to reach the keys, and if he made a mistake, his father would beat him. Sometimes Beethoven would be locked in a cellar, or sometimes awakened in the middle of the night to make him practice all the way through the night until the sun came up. These are not easy things to talk about, because it was an awful thing for Beethoven to go through. Awful thing for anybody to go through. It's something, though. Beethoven had to go through all that, but he survived and became one of the most amazing musicians and composers ever. But those experiences affected him. Beethoven wasn't particularly great at school. He wasn't good at math. He wasn't good at spelling. Some historians think that Beethoven was dyslexic, which means his brain mixed up letters and numbers a little bit. It made it hard for him to write or do math problems. Beethoven even said of himself, "Music comes to me more readily than words." But he started becoming a better and better musician. He learned to play the violin, the clavier, the organ. He started taking pipe organ lessons from Bonn's best organist, Christian Gottlieb Neef. In fact, in 1781, when he was 10 years old, Beethoven dropped out of school to study music full-time with Neef. He didn't stop learning, he just focused on learning music. He also got to study with a composer named Franz Joseph Haydn. Hey, all musicians know Papa Haydn. He wrote more symphonies and string quartets than anyone. Haydn actually stopped by Bonn to work with Beethoven. I guess people were starting to recognize that Beethoven was going to be a great musician someday. Beethoven had some other famous teachers, Johann Schenk and Antonio Salieri. But the most famous composer who worked with Beethoven was the great Mozart himself. Beethoven went to Vienna for a short visit when he was 17 years old and met Mozart. Mozart had Beethoven improvise a piece. In other words, he said, "Hey Beethoven, here's a melody. Make something up." Evidently, Beethoven did such an amazing job that Mozart said, "Watch out for that boy. One day he will give the world something to talk about." Historians also think that Beethoven studied with Mozart a little in Vienna, but Beethoven had to return to Bonn because his mother had gotten sick. Beethoven's mom died that year, and Beethoven stayed in Bonn for a while. He was admitted to Bonn University when he was 19 years old. So, in 1792, when Beethoven was almost 22 years old, he decided to travel to Vienna to stay. Mozart had just died a year earlier, so he could not study with him anymore. But he knew he needed to get there. You see, if you wanted to be a famous musician in Germany, you kind of had to move to Vienna. Mozart lived in Vienna. The King of Austria had his palace in Vienna, and the king was a big fan of music. All the big concert halls and opera houses were in Vienna. Nowadays in our country, if you want to be a famous musician or television or movie star, there are two cities that you go to, New York City and LA, right? But back then, it was Vienna. If you were in Germany and you wanted to be a famous musician, Vienna. In Vienna, he continued writing music and performing. People really started to pay attention to his work. He went on a big concert tour in 1798 and was a big hit. He traveled all over Germany to Prague, Dresden, Berlin. Big hit playing his piano. He was known for his flashy and fast piano playing, and he really worked on cultivating a certain kind of personality. gruff, grouchy, intense, and not very polite. A guy named Julius Benedict described him this way. Beethoven. He's a short, stout man with a very red face, small, piercing eyes and bushy eyebrows. General untidiness. In those small, piercing eyes, an expression of sublimity and melancholy. That means peacefulness and sadness. His hair flowing over his shoulders, sometimes contracting his brows when he was concentrating, sometimes bursting into a forced laughter, painful to listeners. Some people think that Beethoven's awful laugh was because he couldn't hear very well. We know that Beethoven lost his hearing later in life. There's a really great story about something that happened during one of Beethoven's concerts one time. Beethoven was playing a concert, and the guy who owned the concert hall, I think, his name was Palafi. He was in the audience and he was being rude to Beethoven. He was talking to a woman next to him all the way during the concert, and Beethoven did something that this guy had never seen anybody do to him before. I'd like to play a game with you right now. You're going to, if you would please, go get your brother or sister or mom or dad or dog or cat or somebody, and you're going to come back and pretend that you're the audience, and you're going to be rude. You're going to talk to your dog or cat or mom or dad or brother or sister while I'm playing Beethoven's music, and I will do to you what Beethoven did to Mr. Palafi years and years ago. Okay, I'll start playing. You go get your mom or dad or brother or sister or dog or cat. For such pigs, I will not play. And Beethoven stalked off the stage. And he didn't come back. And the next night, there are twice as many people at the concert hall. They're waiting to see what Beethoven would do next.